Good evening, everyone. A very warm good evening to each and every one of you watching this session. Once again, back from Biopoint, stream the world of bio with yet another amazing session on the chapter Breathing and Exchange of Gases, a one-shot lecture right in front of you for the Sweet Meet 2021 batch. Yes, hope you all are perfectly fine. So let's move on with our today's session with the full Josh. Let's start it. Reminding if anyone new is watching our session, do join the Telegram group and become a part of Biopoint team. Yes, the direct link to join the Telegram group is given there in the description box, and that is t.me/meet_biopoint. Yes, so let's move on with our session. Do hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe Biopoint, staying the world of bio for further session updates. Without wasting much time, let's move on with our chapter Breathing and Exchange of Gases. The process of exchange of oxygen from the atmosphere with carbon dioxide produced by the cell is called breathing. It occurs in two stages, that is of inspiration and expiration. So the two stages that are involved in breathing is called as inspiration and expiration. Yes. So what happens during inspiration? During inspiration, air enters the lungs. Yes, from the atmosphere, and during expiration, what happens? Air leaves the lungs. These are just very basic introduction from the chapter Breathing and Exchange of Gases. So what is happening during the very first time? That is during inspiration, air is entering, and during expiration, the air is leaving. Yes, we all have heard another term for this as inhaling and exhaling, inhalation and exhalation. Yes, all these are different terms for inspiration and expiration. Since the procedure is same, air is entering the lungs, inhalation or inspiration, air is leaving the lungs, expiration or exhalation. Yes, so let's move on the further topics of this chapter. The difference between breathing and respiration. What is breathing? It is simply an intake of fresh air and removal of foul air. Intake of fresh air and removal of foul air is known as breathing. And this breathing is a physical process. No energy is released during the process of breathing and is an extracellular process. Yes. And what is respiration? Respiration is the oxidation of food to form carbon dioxide, water, and energy. It is a biochemical process, whereas breathing is a physical process. Energy released is in the form of ATP and is an intracellular process that is occurring within a cell. Yes. So physical process is breathing, that is with just inspiration and inspiration. And respiration is a biochemical process, that is, it is the activities that are taking place inside a body cell. Yes, and the release of energy is only done in case of respiration, and that is in form of ATP, whereas no energy is released in case of breathing. Is it clear? That's all about the difference between breathing and respiration. Respiratory organs. Respiratory organs, the mechanism of breathing varies in different organisms according to their body structure and habitat. Yes, so the body structure and the habitat or the surrounding in which they live makes the respiratory organs get adapted in such a way that enables them to inspire the air from the atmosphere. Yes, so the different respiratory organs that are present in different organisms are, the very first one described is the entire body surface. Yes, the entire body surface or the general body surface is used as a respiratory organ by certain organisms like sponges, coelenterate, flatworms. These three set of organisms use their general body surface as their respiratory organ. And after that, the second type of respiratory organ that is given here is the skin. And the moist skin is used by earthworm for its respiration. Moist skin is used by earthworm for its respiration. The third system or third organ given here is the tracheal system, and that is used by the insects. Insects use their tracheal system or their trachea as a means of respiration. Yes. And the fourth one given here is the gills. And gills is used by fishes and aquatic arthropods. Fishes and aquatic arthropods use gills as a respiratory organ. Yes, and the fifth organ and the last and final given here, the organ used as a respiratory organ is that the lungs, and this is the case of amphibians and mammals. Is it clear? Is it clear till now? Give me thumbs up on the screen. Thank you all for your responses. So let's move on. Human respiratory system. Human respiratory system consists of a pair of nostrils, pharynx, larynx, bronchi, and bronchioles that finally terminates into alveoli. So these are the different structures that is included or that is constituting a human respiratory system. Yes, so the human respiratory system is starting from a pair of nostrils that further connects pharynx. Pharynx is a common passage for both food and air. And after that, moving on with the larynx or the sound box or the voice box. And after that, into a initial bronchi or a primary bronchi that divides into a secondary bronchi, further dividing into tertiary bronchi that again divides into primary bronchioles, secondary bronchioles, and tertiary bronchioles that terminates into an alveoli. This is what is happening in case of a human respiratory system. What is the structure of a human respiratory system? Yes. So I hope that's fine. So let's move on with the further points. Nasal chamber open into pharynx that leads to larynx. Larynx has the voice box or the sound box that help in sound production. All of you know that. What is the function of a voice box or a sound box? That is to produce the sound, right? So the voice box or the sound box helps in sound production, and that is located in the larynx. The trachea, primary, secondary, and tertiary bronchi and initial bronchioles are supported by incomplete cartilaginous rings. Yes, incomplete cartilaginous rings lines these trachea, bronchi, and bronchioles. So look, if this is the trachea, this trachea consists of certain cartilaginous rings like this in their path. Is it clear? So why such rings are present? Why such rings are present? The rings prevents the collapsing of the trachea. Look here. In such a way, the air moves and this trachea does not collapse even if in the absence of air. So this incomplete cartilaginous rings are present to prevent the collapsing of trachea in the absence of air. Each bronchiole terminates into an irregular walled vascularized bag-like structure called alveoli. If you look here, like this, when a trachea ends and that ends into a fine alveoli. Yes, alveoli grouped into a grape-like structure. Is it clear? And that's about brief introduction in human respiratory system. And what else we can say? We can say this human respiratory system as endodermal in origin. So we have learned the different germinal layers in the previous one-shot session of human reproduction. And there you have learned about ectoderm, endoderm, and mesoderm. Yes, and here we can see the human respiratory system is endodermal in origin. Yes. That's about the introduction. So let's move on with the further slides. So here is a diagram depicting the human respiratory system. Yes. Diagram depicting the human respiratory system. You can see another structure called as what? Epiglottis. So when this pharynx is moving on with the trachea and larynx, there is a flap-like structure covering the opening of the trachea. Yes, a flap-like structure. And what is the function of such a flap-like structure? that prevent the entry of food into the larynx. Yes, and that is a thin elastic cartilaginous flap, and that is known as what the epiglottis. And what is its function? It prevents the entry of food into the trachea or into the larynx during the process of swallowing. Yes, and the further structures is larynx, trachea, tube pleural membranes. What are these pleural membranes? That is lungs is well protected by a double membranous structure called pleura. Yes. So, and between the two membranes of this pleura, there consists of a pleural fluid. Pleural fluid. Yes. And these pleural membrane and these two layers of pleura is known as what? The pleural membranes. Is it clear about that? So this fluid or the pleural fluid reduces the friction on the surface of this lungs. Yes. And that's about the structure. Yes. Alveoli, pleural fluid, bronchiole, diaphragm, lungs, bronchus, and the cut end of a, and those all are just depicted in this figure. Is it clear? So let's move on. The branching network of bronchi, bronchioles, and alveoli collectively forms the lungs. Yes, so these are the three structures that are present inside the lungs. Yes, yeah, what? Bronchi, bronchioles, and finally alveoli. Two lungs are covered with double-layered pleura, having pleural fluid between them to reduce friction on the lung surface. That's about pleura and this what structure of human respiratory system. And now we are going to analyze each of their functions as well as how the contaction is occurring in detail. Is it clear? So is it fine till now? Is it fine till now? Thank you so much for your responses. So let's move on. Conducting parts include nostrils, pharynx, larynx, and trachea. And their main functions include the transport of atmospheric air into the alveoli and removing a foreign particle from air, humidifying it and bringing it to body temperature. So the basic conduction functions that is occurring in our body is the transportation of the atmospheric air. Yes, atmospheric air when inhaled, they should be transferred to the respective respiratory organs, such as the lungs in case of humans. And such a thing is one of the basic function involved in transportation or conduction. And after that, the next conduction function is the removing of foreign particles from this air. Yes. And the exchange parts are alveoli. So this alveoli is the site of gaseous exchange. That is, a purified air is exchanged with the tissues, and the used or the deoxygenated air or the air with less oxygen content is brought back to the blood, and such an exchange is occurring in the alveoli. So it is regarded as the site of gaseous exchange. So alveoli is the site of actual diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide between blood and the atmospheric air. That's what we have just discussed right now. So let's move on. Steps of respiration. What all are the different steps that are involved in respiration? Yes. So the respiration involves 5 basic steps, and this given there in your NCERT as well. Yes, just before mechanism of breathing, right? Breathing in which oxygen-rich air, atmospheric air is diffused in and carbon dioxide-rich alveolar air is diffused out. Yes, that is the very first step of respiration. That is oxygen-rich atmospheric air. Oxygenated atmospheric air is just diffused inside, and carbon dioxide or deoxygenated air is just moved outside. Yes. So diffusion of gases across alveolar membrane. So these gaseous exchanges should be occurring across an alveolar membrane. Is that is the second step of respiration. The third step is the transport of gases by blood. Gases should be transported by blood, and that is the third step involved in the respiration. Fourth one is the diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide between blood and the tissues. Yes, that's as we have discussed, the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood, they should be moving outside and inside, and it through the lungs. Yes, it should be passing through the lungs for purification as well. And such a diffusion should also be occurring, and that is also a step of respiration. Utilization of oxygen by cells to obtain energy and release of carbon dioxide. This is also another step of respiration. Is it clear? Is it clear? So give me hearts on the screen if it's perfectly fine till now. After that, we will have a recap till what we have learned so far. Yes, so give me hearts on the screen as fast as possible. Thank you so much. So let's just have a recap of what we have learned so far. Yes. So we have learned about breathing and its definition. Yes, the two stages in case of breathing. And after that, we have learned about the differences between breathing and respiration. After that, about the respiratory organs in various organisms, that is their body surface, skin, tracheal system, gills, lungs, all these things we have just discussed, right? So after that, we have covered about the human respiratory system, what all are the structures involved or constituting that system. That is a pair of nostrils, pharynx, larynx, bronchi, bronchioles, and alveoli finally, and the cartilaginous rings or the supportive cartilaginous rings in the trachea. Yes, and the finally dividing alveoli. Yes, after that we have analyzed the structure of a human respiratory system, and after that about the pleural membranes, and after that the contacting parts and the exchange and diffusion, that is exchange by diffusion between the alveoli and the blood. Yes, and after that about the different or the various steps involved in respiration. Is it clear? Is it clear? And now we are moving on with mechanism of breathing. Yes, mechanism of breathing. Let's move on. Breathing involves inspiration and expiration. So during inspiration, what happens, as we have discussed, atmospheric air is drawn inside. Atmospheric air is drawn in. And during expiration, alveolar air is released out. Yes, so movement of air in and out takes place due to difference in pressure gradient. So difference in the pressure, that is in the atmospheric pressure and the pressure inside our body and the blood vessels, results in the transportation of blood, and the results in the purification of blood, and results in the release of blood between the body to the into the body and outside the body. Yes, so inspiration occurs when pressure inside the lung is less. Yes, so if the pressure is less, what process occurring? Inspiration is occurring. And if the pressure is more in lungs than outside, what is occurring? Expiration is occurring. The diaphragm and external and internal intercostal muscles between the ribs helps in developing pressure gradient due to change in volume. Yes, we will learn that the diaphragm has increased in its size during such a process. The intercostal muscles expanded. All these things are resulting in the change in volume. Change in surface area results in the difference in pressure. And that results in the occurrence of two processes called inspiration and expiration. Is it clear? Is it clear? So let's read the theory first, and after that move on with the diagram. Yes, the contraction of intercostal muscles lift the ribs and the sternum, causing an increase in volume of thoracic cavity, results in decrease in pressure than the atmospheric pressure, and that causes inspiration. So what is happening during inspiration? During inspiration, intercostal muscles contract, ribs and sternum raise or lifts from their position, volume of thoracic cavity increases, pressure decreases from compared to the atmospheric pressure, and what happens? Causing the process of inhalation of air, or the air moves inside. Is it clear? So then what is occurring in case of expiration? Just opposite to this. Relaxation of diaphragm and intercostal muscles reduce thoracic volume and increase the pressure, causing expiration. So the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles just gets relaxed, and reduce the volume of the thoracic cavity and causing an increase in pressure and the air moves outward. Is it clear? Is it clear? These are the two mechanisms that are involved in breathing. So relaxation of diaphragm, yes, as we have just read that point. The volume of air involved in breathing movements is estimated by using spirometer. That's an instrument used to measure the rate of breathing. Yes. So breathing movement is estimated by using spirometer for clinical assessment or pulmonary functions. Yes, for assessing the pulmonary function, what is the term pulmonary related to? It is related to the lungs. So assessment of pulmonary functions, what is involved? What instrument is used? An instrument called spirometer is used. Is it clear upon that? Yes. So let's move on with the respiratory volume and capacities. Respiratory volume and capacities. After that, we have about exchange of gases, transportation of gases, functions of respiration, and after that, the disorders of respiratory system. Very few slides are left. Yes. So let's move on with respiratory volume and capacities. What about respiratory volume and capacities? The very first term that you have to learn is the tidal volume. What is tidal volume? It is the volume of air inspired or expired during a normal respiration. That is about 500 ml, 500 milliliter in a healthy man. Yes. So the volume of air inspired or the volume of air expired is known as tidal volume, and it is almost 500 ml. Yes, the volume is 500 ml in a healthy man. The second one is inspiratory reserve volume. Additional volume of air that the person can inspire by a forceful inspiration is called as inspiratory reserve volume. That is, just inhale yourself first, the normal inhalation. And after that, once more a forced inhalation. Yes, such an inspiration or inhalation is known as inspiratory reserve volume, and it is about 2,500 to 3,000 ml. Yes, so the inspiratory reserve volume is 2,500 to 3,000 ml. The third one is the expiratory reserve volume. Expiratory reserve volume is the additional volume of air a person can expire by a forceful expiration. Yes. So what is that? Just expire, just a normal expiration, and after that suddenly followed by a forced expiration. And the volume of air involved in expiratory reserve volume is 1,000 to 1,100 ml. 1,000 to 1,100 ml, whereas in case of inspiratory reserve volume, it is 2,500 to 3,000 ml. Yes, and tidal volume, it is 500 ml. Yes, that's about tidal volume, inspiratory reserve volume, and expiratory reserve volume. Now moving on with residual volume. What do you mean by residual volume? The volume of air remaining in lungs even after a forcible expiration. So even after we do a forcible expiration, the volume of some air is left in the lungs. Yes, so such an air is known as the residual volume, that is left there as a residue. Yes, and it is about 1,100 to 1,200 ml. 1,100 to 1,200 ml. So inspiratory capacity, that is the sum of tidal volume and inspiratory reserve volume. So the sum of tidal volume and inspiratory reserve volume gives the inspiratory capacity, and their value should be the sum of tidal volume and inspiratory reserve volume. So almost it might be 3,500 ml. Yes, so almost it will be 3,500 ml. Next is the expiratory capacity, that is tidal volume plus expiratory reserve volume. So 500 plus 1,100, 1,600 ml almost. About 1,600 ml. Is it clear? The next is functional residual capacity, or FRC, which is the sum of expiratory reserve volume and residual volume. Expiratory reserve volume 1,000 to 1,100 and residual volume 1,200. Yes. 2,300 almost. Yes. Right, 1,100 plus 1,200, 2,300 ml. So vital capacity is a maximum volume of air that a person can breathe in after a forcible expiration. That is a sum of expiratory reserve volume, tidal volume, and inspiratory reserve volume. And last is the total lung capacity, which is the total volume of air that is accumulated in the lungs at the end of a forced inspiration, which can be a sum of vital capacity and residual volume, or expiratory reserve volume plus inspiratory reserve volume plus residual volume and tidal volume. The sum of all the four gives the total lung capacity, almost 5,000 to 6,000 ml, or to 5 to 6 liters. Is it clear? This is all about respiratory volume and capacities. So give me thumbs up if it's perfectly fine till now. Do it fast. Thank you so much for your responses. So let's move on. Exchange of gases or gaseous exchange. Exchange of gases takes place at two sites, that is alveoli to blood and between blood and tissues. These are the two sites where exchange of gases occurs. Exchange of gases occur by simple diffusion due to pressure or concentration gradient, solubility of gases, or thickness of the membrane. So these are the conditions or criteria where exchange of gases occurs. That is by simple diffusion. And when this diffusion occurs when there is a difference in pressure gradient, yes, or in the solubility of gases or the thickness of the membrane. Pressure contributed by an individual gas in a mixture is called partial pressure, represented by PCO2 and PO2. Yes, so these are the two different representations of partial pressure of gases. So what is partial pressure? It is the pressure contributed by individual gas in a mixture of gas. Yes, so partial pressure PCO2 represents the partial pressure of carbon dioxide and PO2 represents the partial pressure of oxygen. Yes, so partial pressure of oxygen and carbon dioxide is different parts involved in diffusion varies from one part to another and moves from high partial to low partial pressure. Yes, so solubility of carbon dioxide is 20 to 25 times more than the solubility of oxygen. Very important point. The solubility of carbon dioxide is 20 to 25 times more than the solubility of oxygen, and carbon dioxide diffuses much faster through the membrane. So the diffusion membrane is three-layered thick. That is alveolar squamous epithelium, endothelium of alveolar capillaries, basement substance between them. So these are the three layers that are involved in diffusion, or that is what completely forming or constituting a diffusion membrane. Is it clear about that? Is it clear? Yes. So let's move on. This is the diagram, and this diagram was a previous year question as well. Yes. Air moving inside and out to the alveolar capillaries. Yes. Squamous epithelium of alveolar wall, one cell thickened. Yes, a blood capillary surrounding the alveolar cavity. Red blood cell present, the endothelium of blood capillaries, and the basement substance. Yes, so do by heart the labeling and the where all these parts are marked. If it's asked for the NEET 2021 question, you are going to get 4+4 marks for that. Yes. So let's move on with the transportation of gases. Transport of gases. Blood is the medium for the transport of carbon dioxide and oxygen. Most of oxygen, that is 97%, is transported through RBC and remaining 3% by blood plasma. 20 to 25% of carbon dioxide is transported by RBC and 70% as bicarbonate, and rest 7% is dissolved state by blood plasma. Yes. So transportation of oxygen. Hemoglobin, that is the red colored pigment present in the RBC. Yes. Combines with oxygen to form oxyhemoglobin. Each hemoglobin combines with 4 oxygen molecules. Binding of oxygen related with the partial pressure of oxygen and carbon dioxide, hydrogen ion concentration, and temperature. Yes, so binding of oxygen with that hemoglobin is related with the PO2 or partial pressure of oxygen, partial pressure of carbon dioxide, hydrogen ion concentration and the temperature. Yes, percentage saturation of hemoglobin and partial pressure of oxygen forms a sigmoid curve, also known as the oxygen dissociation curve. For example, their graph can be drawn in such a way. Yes, a sigmoid curve. Is it clear? So in the alveoli, PO2 is more and PCO2 is less. Less H plus ions concentration and lower temperature favor the binding of oxygen with hemoglobin, where opposite condition in tissues favor the dissociation of oxyhemoglobin. Yes, so less hydrogen concentration and lower temperature and more partial pressure of oxygen and less partial pressure of carbon dioxide favor the binding of oxygen with that of hemoglobin. Is it clear? Is it clear till now? So this is the sigmoid curve or the oxygen dissociation curve. Is it clear? On the y-axis, you have the positive saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen, and x-axis partial pressure of oxygen with hemoglobin, oxygen. That is in case of mm of Hg. Yes. Is it clear? Is it clear till now? Thank you so much for your responses. So let's move on. Transport of carbon dioxide. After that, the regulation of respiration. Then you have the functions of respiratory system, and finally disorders. That's all what you have to learn from the chapter breathing and exchange of gases. One of the very simplest chapter from NCERT class 11. Is it clear? So carbon dioxide is transported by hemoglobin as carbaminohemoglobin, and in tissues PCO2 is high and PO2 is less. That favor the binding of carbon dioxide with hemoglobin. Of God. Okay, back. So carbon dioxide transport, as we have discussed, it is by the hemoglobin and it is in the form of carbaminohemoglobin, whereas oxygen is transported in the form of oxyhemoglobin. Yes, and in tissues, carbon dioxide, partial pressure of carbon dioxide must be high and the oxygen should be less. And that favor the binding of carbon dioxide with hemoglobin. Opposite condition helping the dissociation of carbaminohemoglobin alveoli. Yes. So enzyme carbonic anhydrase helps in the formation of carbonate ions to transport carbon dioxide. So certain enzymes such as carbonic anhydrase helps in the formation of carbonate ions, and that carbonate ions helps in the transportation of carbon dioxide. Is it clear? Is it clear? So let's move on with regulation of respiration. So respiration have ability to maintain and moderate the rate of respiration to, human beings have the ability to maintain and moderate the rate of respiration to fulfill the demand of body tissue by the neural system. Respiratory system rhythmic center is located in the medulla region of the hindbrain. Pneumotaxic center in pons moderate the function of respiratory rhythm center. So the respiratory rhythm center, where is it situated? It is situated in the medulla oblongata. And where is medulla oblongata region? Where is medulla oblongata region? Yes, in the hindbrain region of medulla oblongata, this respiratory rhythm center is located. And the functions of the respiratory rhythm center is mediated by pneumotaxic center located in the pons varoli. Is it clear about that? So chemosensitive area near rhythm center is highly sensitive to carbon and H plus ions that ultimately control the respiratory rate. Oxygen does not play a major role in controlling the rate of respiration. Is it clear about that? Is it clear till now? Yes. So the functions of respiration: energy production, maintenance of acid-base balance, maintenance of temperature, return of blood and lymph. These all are the four basic functions of respiration. Mountain sickness is the condition characterized by the ill effect of hypoxia, that or shortage of oxygen in the tissues at high altitude, commonly to person going to high altitude for the first time. So where is mountain sickness found? Their mountain sickness is characterized by hypoxia. What is hypoxia? It is a disease caused by the shortage of oxygen in the tissues. So the person feels difficult in breathing. Yes, so in such a high altitude, when a person is going for the first time, person experiences mountain sickness. So their symptoms will be loss of appetite, nausea, vomiting, and occurs due to expansion of gas in the digestive system. Breathlessness occurs because of the pulmonary edema. Headache, depression, disorientation, lack of sleep, weakness, and fatigue. All these are the various symptoms of mountain sickness. Is it clear? So the further disorders of respiratory system are asthma. What is asthma? It is due to allergic reaction of the foreign particles that affect the respiratory tract. And the symptoms may be coughing, wheezing, and difficulty in breathing. So these are the symptoms that that an asthma person suffering from asthma is suffering from. There is coughing, wheezing, and the difficulty in breathing, and that is due to the excess of mucus in the wall of respiratory tract. So the excess of mucus present in the wall of respiratory tract result in asthma. The second one is emphysema, and that is inflation or abnormal distension of bronchioles or alveolar sacs of lungs. That occurs due to destroying of septa between alveoli because of smoking and inhalation of other smokes. Exhalation becomes difficult and lungs remains inflated. Yes, so the exhalation becomes difficult and the lung remains inflated, and the occupational respiratory disorders that is occurring due to the occupation of individual caused by inhalation of gas, fumes or dust present in the surrounding of workplace. This includes silicosis, asbestos due to exposure of silica and asbestos. Yes, so the symptom includes proliferation of fibrous connective tissue of the upper part of the lung causing inflammation. So these are the symptoms that is for the person suffering from respiratory disorders based on their occupation. Yes, the persons working in case of mines. Yes, they may usually suffering from occupational respiratory disorders. Yes, so the last and final topic is the pneumonia, and which is the acute infection or inflammation of lungs or alveoli, and that is caused by a bacterium called as Streptococcus pneumoniae. Alveoli become inflated and most of the air spaces of the alveoli is filled with the fluid and dead white corpuscles, limiting gaseous exchange. So pneumonia may usually be seen as a post symptom of most of the diseases. Yes, most of the diseases, whether it's a viral fever or anything, it finally, in most cases, it ends in pneumonia. Yes, that's about in case of disorders of respiratory system, as well as the entire chapter of breathing and exchange of gases. And thanks for watching, each and every one of you. It's me signing off from your favorite and my favorite Biopoint team, World of Bio. Bye-bye.